I never planned on attending the Parker family reunion that Saturday. But my fiancé Ryan insisted, saying it was important I meet his extended family before our wedding next spring. If I'd known what awaited me there, I might have invented a sudden illness. Just be yourself, Ryan said as we pulled into the driveway of his aunt's sprawling lake house. They're going to love you. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, chosen carefully to make a good impression. As marketing director for Meridian Tech, one of the fastest growing startups in the city, I'd become adept at projecting confidence in uncomfortable situations. But meeting 50 relatives at once was different from presenting to a boardroom. What if they don't? I asked, only half joking. Ryan squeezed my hand. Impossible. You're brilliant, successful, and you're marrying me. That's 3 points in your favor already. The reunion was in full swing when we arrived. Children raced across the manicured lawn while adults clustered around tables laden with food. Ryan guided me through introductions, his hand reassuringly pressed against my lower back. His family seemed pleasant enough until we reached the patio. Well, look who finally decided to show up, came a voice that instantly made Ryan tense beside me. And he brought a date. Wonders never cease. The man who spoke was around 40, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of tan that comes from vacations rather than actual outdoor work. His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were coolly assessing me. James, Ryan said, his voice tight. This is Olivia, my fiancé. Fiancé? James raised an eyebrow, looking me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. That's a step up from your usual standards. I extended my hand, determined to be polite despite his rudeness. It's nice to meet you. James ignored my hand, instead turning to Ryan. Aunt Margaret was just asking about your career situation. Still, what was it again? Something with computers? Software development, Ryan said evenly. I've told you this several times. Right. James waved dismissively. Not exactly setting the world on fire with that, are you? Though I suppose it's better than your college band days. I felt Ryan stiffen. I knew how hard he worked, how talented he was. He'd recently been headhunted by several companies but was taking his time deciding on his next move. Actually, I began. And what do you do, Olivia? James cut me off. Let me guess. Teacher? Nurse? Something appropriately feminine? I could feel several nearby conversations quieting as people tuned in to our exchange. I work in marketing, I said simply. James smirked. Ah, so you make pretty PowerPoints and order lunch for the real executives. How charming. Ryan stepped forward. James, that's enough. What? I'm making conversation. James grabbed a drink from a passing tray. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just surprised you found someone with actual employment. Remember that artist girl? Talk about a failure. Something in me snapped. I'd spent years climbing the corporate ladder, facing down men exactly like James, men who assumed my gender defined my capabilities. Actually, I said, my voice steady, I'm the marketing director at Meridian Tech. We just closed our Series C funding round at $50 million, and our valuation has tripled in the past year. For a moment, James seemed taken aback, but he recovered quickly. Well, dating up, aren't you, Ryan? He chuckled. Though these tech companies hand out fancy titles like candy these days. Director probably means you have a cubicle with a window. Before I could respond, Ryan's phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. I need to take this, he said apologetically. It's work. As Ryan stepped away, James leaned closer. Between us, he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You could do better than my cousin. Ryan's always been the family failure. Big dreams, no follow-through. Whatever he's told you about his career, I guarantee it's exaggerated. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. The casual cruelty was startling. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't cause a scene, Ryan returned, looking unexpectedly pleased. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Better than okay," he said, giving me a meaningful look. That was Meridian Tech. They've made their decision. My heart skipped. Ryan had interviewed with my company 2 weeks ago for a senior developer position, but I hadn't been involved in the hiring process for his department to avoid any conflict of interest. "And?" I prompted. Ryan grinned. "I got the job. I start next month as their new head of development." James snorted. "Head of development? Come on, cousin. We all know how you embellish." I felt a slow smile spread across my face as the perfect opportunity presented itself. "Actually, James," I said, "Ryan isn't embellishing. Meridian just restructured their entire tech division. The head of development reports directly to the CTO and works closely with the marketing director." I paused, savoring the moment. "That would be me." James blinked, his expression shifting from dismissive to uncertain. "In fact," I continued, "I've heard great things about Ryan's interviews from my colleagues. They were particularly impressed with his new authentication protocol." Ryan was watching, me with undisguised admiration, while James seemed to be processing this new information with difficulty. "You mean," James began. "Yes," I said pleasantly. "Ryan will be starting an executive position at one of the fastest-growing companies in the tech sector. The position comes with a substantial salary, stock options, and a corner office." I took a sip of my drink. "Not bad for the family failure, wouldn't you agree?" The look on James's face was priceless. A mixture of disbelief and growing realization that he'd just insulted someone who now wielded significant influence in his cousin's career. What James said next would determine exactly how uncomfortable the rest of this family reunion would become for both of us. James's face flushed an alarming shade of red. He cleared his throat, eyes darting between Ryan and me as if hoping one of us would crack a smile and reveal this was all an elaborate joke. "Well," he finally managed, setting his drink down with a little too much force. "Isn't that convenient?" The insinuation hung in the air. A few nearby relatives shifted uncomfortably. "What exactly are you implying, James?" Ryan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. James shrugged, regaining some of his composure. "Nothing. Just interesting timing, that's all. Congratulations on the nepotism." I felt my professional reputation being questioned and stepped forward. Ryan went through 3 rounds of technical interviews with our engineering team. I recused myself completely from the hiring process precisely to avoid this kind of suggestion. "Course you did," James said with a condescending smile. "I'm sure it's all very above board." An older woman with Ryan's eyes approached our increasingly tense circle. "Ryan, there you are." She embraced him warmly before turning to me. "And you must be Olivia. I'm Margaret, Ryan's favorite aunt." I gratefully shook her hand, appreciating the interruption. "It's lovely to meet you." "James, be a dear and help. Your uncle with the grill," Margaret said, though it clearly wasn't a request. James hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "This conversation isn't over," he muttered as he brushed past us. Once he was out of earshot, Margaret sighed. "I apologize for my nephew. James has always been competitive with Ryan." "That's putting it mildly," Ryan said. "He's been like this since we were kids." Margaret patted his arm. "He's going through a difficult time. The bank passed him over for promotion again last month." This new information clicked into place. James worked in banking, a field currently experiencing major disruption from fintech companies. Companies like Meridian. "I didn't know James was in banking," I said carefully. 20 years at First Capital, Margaret confirmed. "He expected to be heading his department by now, but..." She trailed off diplomatically. The afternoon progressed more pleasantly after that. Ryan introduced me to cousins, aunts, and uncles who shared embarrassing stories about his childhood. I found myself relaxing despite the earlier confrontation until I excused myself to find the restroom and encountered James in the hallway, examining family photos. "Quite the performance out there," he said without turning around. It wasn't a performance. He finally faced me. "Let's be honest with each other, Olivia. We both know how the world works. Ryan's a mediocre developer at best." "You're wrong," I said firmly, "and you obviously haven't seen his work." "What I see," James said, stepping closer, "is my cousin dating someone with hiring influence at a coveted company. Suddenly he gets a director-level position? Please." "Head of development," I corrected. "And the hiring committee made that decision independently." James laughed humorlessly. "Right. The tech industry and its meritocracy myth. My division has lost 3 major clients to fintech startups this year. Companies exactly like yours that run on hype and overinflated valuations. Now his hostility made more sense. He wasn't just jealous of Ryan. He saw companies like Meridian as threats to his traditional banking career. Innovation isn't hype, James. No? Then explain how my cousin, who couldn't even finish his band's first album, is suddenly qualified to lead a development team at a $150 million company? I could have told him about Ryan's brilliant work at his previous company, about the authentication protocol he'd developed in his spare time that had impressed our CTO enough to fast-track his application. But I realized James didn't actually want answers. He wanted validation for his resentment. "I don't have to explain anything to you," I said, turning to leave. "You know what's going to happen, right?" James called after me. "Your bubble will burst. These tech startups always do. And when Meridian comes crashing down, you'll both be exposed as the frauds you are." I stopped, my hand on the doorframe. Interesting prediction from someone whose industry is increasingly irrelevant. His face hardened. "We'll see who's irrelevant. First Capital is bidding on the Peterson account next month. Your company wants it too, I hear. Should be an interesting competition." My blood ran cold. The Peterson account was indeed our top priority for the quarter. It would establish Meridian in the financial sector in a significant way. How did James know about our bid? "Didn't expect me to know that, did you?" James smirked. "Banking may be traditional, but we still have our sources." Before I could respond, Ryan appeared at the end of the hallway. "There you are. Everyone's heading down to the lake for the family photo." James's demeanor instantly shifted. "Just getting to know my new cousin-in-law," he said pleasantly. As he passed Ryan, he clapped him on the shoulder. "No hard feelings about earlier. Family banter, you know?" Ryan looked between us uncertainly. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, not wanting to escalate the situation at a family event. "Just getting some insider banking perspectives." As we walked toward the lake, Ryan squeezed my hand. "Whatever he said, ignore it. James has always been threatened by anything he can't control." I nodded absently, my mind racing. What James had revealed wasn't just petty family jealousy. It was potentially valuable competitive intelligence. If First Capital knew about our bid for Peterson, what else did they know? The family photo session was chaotic, children being arranged by height, elderly relatives complaining about the sun, someone's dog photobombing every attempt. I smiled automatically while my thoughts remained on James's veiled threat. As the photographer instructed everyone to say cheese, I caught James staring at me from the corner of the frame, a calculating look in his eyes. This wasn't just a family rivalry anymore. This was business. And in business, I never backed down from a challenge. What James didn't realize was that he'd just given me valuable information too. And Monday morning, I would be putting it to good use. Monday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in months. The weekend's confrontation with James had transformed from a personal affront into a professional challenge, one I was determined to meet head-on. I arrived at Meridian's glass and steel headquarters an hour early, nodding to the security guard as I made my way to the executive floor. Our offices occupied the top 3 floors of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Exactly the kind of fancy tech company setting that would make James sneer. The thought brought a smile to my face as I unlocked my office door. My assistant Danny appeared in my doorway at precisely 8 a.m. holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're early," she remarked, setting one on my desk. "Productive weekend?" "Enlightening," I replied. "I need to see Thomas as soon as he's in." Thomas Chen, our CFO, was the driving force behind our bid for the Peterson account. If anyone would know how our confidential information might have leaked, it would be him. "He's already here," Danny said. "Want me to grab him?" 15 minutes later, Thomas sat across from me, reviewing the notes I'd made about my conversation with James. "First Capital wasn't on our radar for Peterson," he said, frowning. "Their tech infrastructure is outdated compared to other bidders." "Apparently. They're making a play anyway," I said. "And somehow they know we're bidding too." Thomas leaned back, brow furrowed. "The question is this legitimate intel or just your future cousin-in-law trying to rattle you?" I considered this. James had been deliberately provocative, but his knowledge of the Peterson bid seemed too specific to be a bluff. "I think it's real," I said finally. "Which means we have a leak," Thomas nodded grimly. "I'll review everyone who's had access to the Peterson proposal. In the meantime, we should assume First Capital knows our approach and adjust accordingly." "I want to lead the pitch myself," I said. It was an impulsive decision, but it felt right. "If we're competing against First Capital, I want to be in the room." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That's Derek's territory as sales director." "Derek can still lead the relationship management," I clarified, "but I want to shape the narrative personally." "Because of this James person?" Thomas asked skeptically. "Because I have insight into how our competition thinks," I countered. "And because the Peterson account needs more than our usual approach." Thomas studied me for a moment before nodding. "I'll run it by Annika, but I think she'll agree. The pitch is in 3 weeks. That gives you time to prepare something compelling." After Thomas left, I threw myself into research. By lunchtime, I had compiled a comprehensive profile of First Capital's previous pitches, their technological weaknesses, and most importantly, their typical approach to client acquisition, which would almost certainly be James's playbook. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Lunch today? I'm checking out the neighborhood near the office." I smiled. Ryan would be starting at Meridian in just 3 weeks. Despite James's insinuations, Ryan had earned this position through his exceptional talent. Our CTO had been pursuing him for months before we even got engaged. "Can't today. Rain check? Busy planning how to crush your cousin's company in a major account bid." His reply came quickly. "That's my girl. James has no idea who he's up against." I was deep in competitive analysis when Danny appeared again. "Sorry to interrupt, but HR needs you to sign off on the new dev team hires, including Ryan's package." I took the folder she offered, flipping through until I found Ryan's offer letter. The compensation details were even better than I'd realized. Substantial equity, signing bonus, and a salary that would make banking industry James apoplectic. I signed with a flourish. "Also," Danny added, "Annika approved your request to lead the Peterson pitch. Derek's not thrilled, but he'll get over it." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and strategy sessions. I was heading out around 7 when my phone rang, an unknown number. "Olivia Morgan," I answered, balancing my laptop bag as I waited for the elevator. "Ms. Morgan." "James." "Parker here." I froze. "How did you get my number?" "LinkedIn Premium," he replied smoothly. "Worth every penny for networking purposes." "What do you want, James?" "I'm busy." "Just a friendly courtesy call," he said, his tone anything but friendly. "I heard through the grapevine that you're personally taking over Meridian's Peterson pitch. Wanted to wish you luck. You'll need it." The elevator doors opened, but I made no move to enter. "Corporate espionage isn't a good look, James." He laughed. Espionage? Please. Peterson's CFO is a member at my golf club. People talk. Just like people at Meridian apparently talk about internal bid strategies. Is there a point to this call? Just giving you a chance to save face, he said. Peterson Banking has been with traditional institutions for 80 years. They're not going to trust their financial security to a tech startup run by millennials, no matter how slick your presentation is. Thanks for the insight, I said dryly. Is that all? One more thing, James said, his voice dropping. I've been looking into Meridian more carefully. Interesting company culture you have there, hiring friends and family, rushing people into leadership positions. The board might be interested to know about these practices. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you threatening me? Not at all, just making an observation. Conflicts of interest can be so damaging to a company's reputation, don't you think? Especially one seeking major financial clients. Ryan's hiring went through proper channels, I said firmly. And unlike some companies, we value merit over tenure. Keep telling yourself that, James replied. Oh, and one last thing. I'll be personally leading First Capital's Peterson pitch team. See you in the boardroom, cousin. He hung up before I could respond. The elevator had gone and returned during our conversation. I stepped in, my mind racing. James wasn't just competing for the account, he was making this personal, threatening to raise questions about Ryan's hiring. Back in my apartment that evening, I recounted the conversation to Ryan, who listened with increasing concern. He's bluffing, Ryan insisted when I finished. There's nothing improper about my hiring. We disclosed our relationship. You recused yourself. Everything was by the book. I know that, I said, pacing our living room. But perception matters, especially with financial clients. So what are you going to do? I stopped pacing, a plan already forming. First, I'm going to win the Peterson account. Then I'm going to deal with your cousin once and for all. Ryan studied my expression. Why do I get the feeling James has no idea what he's just started? I smiled grimly. Because he doesn't. He thinks he's playing chess, but I'm playing a different game entirely. And what game is that? Ryan asked. I thought about the research I'd done that day, about First Capital's outdated approach, about James's obvious blind spots regarding technology and innovation, about his fundamental misunderstanding of what companies like Peterson Banking actually needed in the modern financial landscape. The kind where he doesn't even realize he's already lost, I replied. James called you a failure at the reunion, right? Let's see how he likes getting beaten by one. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I assembled a small elite team to work on the Peterson pitch, including our best UX designer, our most innovative financial product developer, and surprisingly, Derek from sales, who, after some initial resistance, had embraced my vision with unexpected enthusiasm. First Capital will focus on tradition and stability, I explained during our strategy session. We need to position ourselves as the bridge between banking's past and its future. Peterson's been around since 1938, Derek pointed out. Their board isn't exactly known for embracing change. That's exactly why we don't pitch ourselves as a revolution, I countered. We're an evolution, helping them maintain their heritage while modernizing their capabilities. We were refining our approach when my phone buzzed with a notification. A LinkedIn connection request from Sandra Peterson, granddaughter of the founder and newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer at Peterson Banking. This is interesting, I murmured, showing the team. Their family just created this position for her last quarter. It signals they're more serious about digital transformation than industry rumors suggest. Can you leverage that connection? Derek asked. I hesitated. Using personal networking tactics felt uncomfortably similar to James's approach, but a legitimate professional connection was different from exploiting family ties. I'll accept and send a professional message, I decided. Nothing that mentions the bid. just opening a dialogue about financial technology innovation. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Sandra at a quiet cafe downtown. She was younger than I expected, perhaps early 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I appreciated your article on ethical data usage in financial applications," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "It aligned with my thinking on how traditional banks need to approach technology." "That's refreshing to hear," I replied honestly. Many traditional institutions view data innovations as threats rather than opportunities. Sandra's smile was, "Were I like my grandfather and half our board? Yes, I'm familiar with the resistance." Our conversation flowed naturally, touching on industry trends, customer expectations, and the unique challenges facing legacy banking institutions. I was careful not to mention Meridian's bid for Peterson's business, and Sandra never brought it up directly. As we were finishing our coffee, Sandra fixed me with a direct look. "I should mention that I've recused myself from the vendor selection process, given my advocacy position. But off the record, we need partners who understand both where banking has been and where it's going." I nodded, understanding the subtle message. That balanced perspective is rarer than it should be. "Indeed." She gathered her things. "I'm speaking at the FinTech Forum next week. Perhaps I'll see you there." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. Back at the office, I adjusted our pitch deck based on the insights from my conversation. We'd been on the right track, but now I understood the internal dynamics at Peterson more clearly. There was a generational shift happening, one we could position ourselves to support. I was deep in revisions when Thomas appeared in my doorway. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "Someone's been asking questions about Ryan's hiring." My stomach dropped. "James?" "Not directly." Thomas entered and closed the door behind him. A reporter from TechBeat reached out to HR for comment on a story about nepotism in startup culture, specifically citing Ryan's upcoming position. I'd expected James to make good on his threat, but not so publicly. What did HR say? Nothing. Yet, they flagged it to legal, who flagged it to me? Thomas sat down. The reporter mentioned several companies, so it's not just about Meridian. But the timing is suspicious. "Especially with the Peterson pitch next week," I said grimly. "This is James trying to undermine us." "Can you prove that?" I shook my head. "Not conclusively, but it's too coincidental." Thomas drummed his fingers on my desk. "Legal wants to issue a standard statement about our hiring practices. I think we should be more proactive." I agree. An idea was forming. Risky, but potentially effective. What if we addressed it head-on? Complete transparency about Ryan's hiring process. "That's unconventional," Thomas said slowly. "But it could neutralize the story." "More than that," I said. "It could demonstrate exactly the kind of ethical approach that financial institutions like Peterson value." By the end of the day, we had prepared a detailed statement documenting Ryan's recruitment, the measures taken to avoid conflicts of interest, and the independent evaluation that had led to his offer. We also included context about Meridian's commitment to merit-based hiring and our rigorous anti-nepotism policies. Instead of waiting for the reporter's story, we published the statement on our company blog under the title "Transparency in Action: How Meridian Tech Handles Potential Conflicts of Interest." That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Interesting PR strategy. Desperate much? James." I deleted the message without responding. Ryan called minutes later. "Have you seen TechBeat's tweet about our statement? They're scrapping their expose angle and doing a piece on transparency in tech hiring instead." I allowed myself a small smile. "That's good news." "It's brilliant news," Ryan corrected. "You turned James's attack into positive coverage." My victory was short-lived. The next morning, I arrived to find Annika, our CEO, waiting in my office. "Just got off the phone with Peterson's CEO. she said without preamble. Apparently, First Capital has made some allegations about our business practices. They're questioning whether we're mature enough as an organization to handle their financial data securely. James, I muttered. He's using backdoor channels to undermine us. Annika raised an eyebrow. You know who's behind this? I briefly explained the situation with Ryan's cousin and his position at First Capital. This is getting personal, she observed, and I don't like when personal issues affect our business opportunities. I understand, I said, tension building in my chest. But I've kept everything professional on our end. See that it stays that way. Annika's tone softened slightly. Your transparency statement was good. Peterson's CEO actually mentioned it positively. But we're on thin ice here. First Capital is playing dirty and we can't afford to slip. After she left, I canceled my morning meetings and retreated to the small conference room we'd been using for Peterson prep. The walls were covered in journey maps, competitive analyses, and mock-ups of customized financial interfaces. I stared at our work, trying to regain my focus. James was escalating, using his banking industry connections to spread doubts about Meridian. The Peterson pitch was in 5 days, and suddenly it felt like much more than a business opportunity was at stake. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. First Capital quarterly results, public webcast. I'd completely forgotten that today was their earnings call. On impulse, I logged in to listen, hoping for any insights that might help counter James's tactics. The call was predictably dry. Solid but unexceptional growth. Cautious outlook for the next quarter. But during the Q&A, something caught my attention. Can you elaborate on First Capital's strategy for competing with fintech disruptors? An analyst asked. The CEO's response was dismissive. We've weathered technology shifts before. Our clients value stability and human relationships over flashy interfaces. We're focused on our core strengths rather than chasing trends. I nearly dropped my phone. That mindset, exactly the backward-looking approach that was causing traditional banks to lose market share, was what James would bring to the Peterson pitch, and in that moment, I knew exactly how to counter him. If First Capital was positioning technology as opposed to human relationships and stability, we would show how the right technology actually enhanced both. I began sketching a new approach, energy flowing through me. By the time the rest of the team arrived, I had outlined a complete revision to our pitch. Change of plans, I announced. We're pivoting our entire approach. Derek looked alarmed. The pitch is in 5 days. And it's going to be the best work we've ever done, I promised, because now we know exactly what we're up against. As I explained my vision, I could see the team catching my enthusiasm. This wasn't just about winning an account anymore. It was about proving that innovation and tradition weren't opposing forces, and showing James that his outdated thinking was precisely why companies like First Capital were becoming increasingly irrelevant. The night before the Peterson pitch, I received another text from James. Looking forward to tomorrow. May the best banker win. I didn't bother reminding him I wasn't a banker. Soon enough, he'd understand exactly what he was competing against, and it wasn't what he expected. The Peterson banking headquarters occupied a stately limestone building in the financial district, its marble lobby a testament to old-world prosperity. I arrived with Derek and Thomas 40 minutes early, giving us time to set up in the boardroom, where both Meridian and First Capital would make their presentations. First Capital presents first at 10 GEAR, then US at 11:15, Derek reminded me as we arranged our materials. Peterson's selection committee will deliberate over lunch and provide initial feedback this afternoon. I nodded, mentally reviewing our revamped pitch. We'd worked around the clock to perfect it, creating a presentation that honored Peterson's heritage while illuminating a path to technological evolution. At 9:50, James arrived with his team, 3 older men in nearly identical navy suits. His momentary surprise at seeing me was quickly masked with a practiced smile. "Olivia," he nodded curtly before turning to his colleagues. "This is the marketing person from Meridian I mentioned." The dismissive introduction was clearly intentional. I extended my hand to each of his colleagues, making sure to properly introduce myself as marketing director while maintaining perfect professionalism. "Your setup looks interesting," James commented, eyeing our digital displays. Peterson Banking has always appreciated traditional presentations. We've brought printed materials for everyone. He patted a stack of leather-bound portfolios with the First Capital logo embossed in gold. "How thoughtful," I replied pleasantly. "We've provided both digital and analog options ourselves, best of both worlds." Before James could respond, the boardroom doors opened and 7 people entered. Peterson's selection committee, led by an elegant silver-haired woman I recognized as Victoria Peterson, the current CEO and granddaughter of the founder. Introductions were made, and First Capital was invited to begin their presentation while we waited in an adjacent room. As we left, James caught my eye with a smug smile that clearly said, "Watch and learn." The next hour crawled by. Derek checked email while Thomas reviewed our financial projections one last time. I paced the room, mentally rehearsing key points and trying not to imagine what James might be saying about Meridian. Finally, a Peterson assistant appeared. "They're ready for you now." We entered to find the committee members reviewing First Capital's leather portfolios. James and his team were gathering their materials, their presentation evidently complete. "Good luck, James," murmured as he passed me. They seemed quite impressed with our stability metrics. I took a deep breath and moved to the front of the room, connecting our presentation to the display system. "Thank you for the opportunity to share Meridian's vision for a partnership with Peterson Banking," I began. "We understand that choosing a financial technology partner is about more than features and interfaces. It's about trust, security, and alignment of values." Victoria Peterson nodded appreciatively, and I continued, "Before showing you what we can do, I'd like to explain how we approach financial partnerships. Instead of launching into our capabilities, I shared a brief case study of how we'd helped a 75-year-old regional bank maintain its community identity while modernizing its services. I emphasized how their customer satisfaction had increased, and critically, how they'd attracted younger customers without alienating their traditional base. "Financial institutions don't need to choose between heritage and innovation," I explained, making eye contact with each committee member. "The right technology doesn't replace the human relationships your bank was built on. It enhances them." From there, we moved into our specific proposals for Peterson, showcasing customized interfaces that reflected their brand aesthetic and culture. Derek demonstrated our security protocols, while Thomas outlined the financial benefits of our approach. Throughout the presentation, I noticed Victoria Peterson watching me with particular intensity. When we finished and opened the floor for questions, she was the first to speak. "Ms. Morgan, your approach is refreshingly different from what we typically see from technology companies. Most try to convince us that everything we've built over 3 generations is obsolete. Nothing that creates lasting customer relationships is obsolete," I replied. "Our goal isn't to replace what works. It's to enhance what could work better. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, ranging from technical specifics to implementation timelines. The committee seemed especially interested in our adaptive authentication system. Ironically, the very protocol Ryan had helped develop at his previous company. As we concluded, Victoria stood. "Thank you for a most illuminating presentation. We'll be in touch with both parties by the end of the week." In the elevator heading down, Derek could barely contain his excitement. "That went better than I expected. Did you see their reaction to the community banking case study? Perfect targeting." "Don't celebrate yet," Thomas cautioned. First Capital has decades of banking relationships we can't match. True, I acknowledged. But relationships evolve, and that's exactly what Peterson needs to do. We were crossing the lobby when I heard my name. Turning, I found Victoria Peterson, approaching. Ms. Morgan, a moment? Derek and Thomas exchanged glances before continuing outside, leaving me alone with Victoria. Your presentation gave me a great deal to think about, she said, particularly your perspective on balancing tradition with innovation. It's something I've been advocating within our organization for some time. It's a delicate balance, I agreed, but critical for institutions like Peterson. She studied me thoughtfully. I understand you recently met with my niece, Sandra. I maintained a neutral expression. Yes, we connected through LinkedIn and had coffee. As I'm sure she mentioned, we were careful not to discuss this bid process. She did mention that, Victoria confirmed. She also said you were one of the few technology executives who truly understood banking culture. She paused. First Capital emphasized their banking expertise today, suggesting that technology companies fundamentally can't understand our industry's needs. I recognized the opening. With respect, that perspective assumes banking and technology must remain separate domains. The most successful financial institutions today are those that become technology companies themselves, with the right partners guiding that transformation. Victoria's expression remained unreadable. An interesting perspective. Well, thank you again for your time today. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help wondering if I'd said too much, or not enough. Outside, I was surprised to find James waiting near our car. Impressive performance, he said, falling into step beside me. All that talk about honoring tradition while pushing technology. Very slick. It wasn't a performance, James. It's our actual approach. He laughed. Come on, Olivia. We both know. Tech companies view banks as dinosaurs waiting for extinction. At least I'm honest about where the industry lines are drawn. That's exactly why you'll lose, I said quietly. You see lines where there should be integration? His expression hardened. Victoria Peterson has known me for 15 years. She plays golf with our CEO. That relationship counts for more than your flashy demos. If relationships were all that mattered, banks wouldn't be losing customers to financial technology companies every day. James stepped closer. Let me make something clear. When First Capital wins this account, and we will, I expect you to keep your professional distance from my family. Ryan can work wherever he wants, but your little power play ends here. Family gatherings are difficult enough without your corporate politics. The irony of James accusing me of bringing corporate politics into family dynamics was almost laughable. This was never about your family, James. You made it about our companies the moment you threatened Ryan's position. I was protecting my cousin from being used as your corporate stepping stone. Ryan doesn't need your protection, I replied evenly. And neither does Peterson Banking. They need honest partners who understand where financial services are heading. James smirked. We'll see what Victoria thinks about that. I've known the Petersons since business school. Trust runs deeper than technology. As he walked away, I couldn't help wondering if he was right. Had I overestimated Peterson's readiness for change? Had I underestimated the power of James's long-standing connections? The next 2 days passed in excruciating slowness. I buried myself in other projects, trying not to obsessively check my email for news from Peterson Banking. Ryan was supportive but wisely avoided discussing his cousin, focusing instead on his preparations to join Meridian the following week. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Victoria Peterson's executive assistant requested my presence at Peterson headquarters Monday morning for a follow-up discussion. Will First Capital representatives be there as well? I asked, trying to gauge what this meeting meant. No, Ms. Morgan. This meeting is specifically with Meridian. Tech, I hung up, my heart racing. An exclusive follow-up could mean we were the preferred vendor, or that they had specific concerns they wanted addressed before making a final decision. I was debating whether to call Derek when my phone buzzed with a text from James. Heard. Anything from Peterson yet? Silence isn't always golden. I ignored it. But minutes later, another text arrived. Victoria and I had a very productive dinner last night. Looking forward to working together. This time, a chill ran through me. Was he bluffing? Or had First Capital already secured the account? Was Monday's meeting simply a courtesy to let us down gently? Before I could spiral further, Annika appeared in my doorway. Just got a call from Victoria Peterson, she announced. They want us both at headquarters Monday morning. Did she give any indication which way they're leaning? Annika's expression was unreadable. Only that they've made their decision and want to discuss next steps in person. I nodded, my mind racing. James's text suggested First Capital had won, but why would Peterson want both Annika and me there to reject us? Whatever happens Monday, Annika said, you ran an excellent campaign. The board was impressed with your approach, especially given the personal complications. After she left, I sat staring at my computer screen, replaying every moment of our presentation, every interaction with Victoria Peterson. Had I been too innovative? Not innovative enough? Had James's personal connections ultimately trumped our superior offering? Only Monday would tell. And somehow, I had to make it through the weekend without letting James's mind games undermine my confidence. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality. I chose my outfit deliberately, a steel blue suit that projected confidence without aggression. This meeting would determine not just the Peterson account, but potentially the course of my career. At Meridian, Ryan had wished me luck with a lingering kiss before heading to his last week at his current job. Whatever happens, you've outclassed James at every turn, he'd assured me. I wanted to believe him, but James's text about dinner with Victoria still nagged at me. Had personal connections trumped professional merit after all? Annika and I rode to Peterson banking in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, we were escorted not to the boardroom where we'd presented, but to Victoria Peterson's private office on the executive floor. The space was impressive. Corner views of the city, furniture that whispered old money rather than shouting it, and walls lined with both Peterson Banking's historical photographs and surprisingly modern art. Victoria greeted us warmly, inviting us to sit at a small conference table where coffee and pastries waited. Thank you for coming, she said. I wanted to discuss our decision in person rather than through a formal letter. Annika nodded. We appreciate that regardless of the outcome. Victoria studied us for a moment. First, let me say that both presentations were compelling in different ways. First, Capital emphasized their deep understanding of traditional banking and their long-standing relationships within the industry. My heart sank. This sounded like the preamble to rejection. Your presentation, on the other hand, Victoria continued, turning to me, highlighted something we've been discussing internally for some time, the need to evolve without abandoning our foundation. I kept my expression neutral, though hope flickered tentatively. After considerable deliberation, Victoria said, we've decided to partner with Meridian Tech for our digital transformation initiative. The words took a moment to register fully. We'd won. Against James's banking connections and industry tenure, we'd actually won. Annika maintained her professional composure, though I caught the flash of triumph in her eyes. We're honored by your confidence in us, she said. I assure you, Peterson Banking will receive our absolute best work. Victoria smiled. I believe that. In fact, it's part of why we've made this decision. She turned to me. Ms. Morgan, your approach resonated particularly with our committee. You didn't try to sell us on technology for technology's sake. You showed us how innovation could enhance our existing strengths. That's exactly our philosophy, I confirmed, still processing our victory. Technology should serve your institutional values, not replace them. Indeed. Victoria took a sip of coffee. There's something else I'd like to discuss. This partnership represents a significant shift for Peterson. We've created a joint implementation committee to oversee the project, and we'd like Meridian to have permanent representation. She looked directly at me. Specifically, we'd like you to serve as co-chair. I blinked in surprise. This went beyond winning the account. It was a vote of confidence in my personal approach. I'd be honored, I said sincerely. Excellent. Victoria handed us each a folder. Here's our formal acceptance and the committee. Structure. We'd like to begin strategic planning next week. As Victoria and Annika discussed contract details, I skimmed the document, noting that the other co-chair would be Sandra Peterson. The implementation committee would also include representatives from Peterson's current banking systems providers, including, I noticed with a jolt, First Capital. When I looked up, Victoria was watching me. Yes, First Capital will retain certain aspects of our business, she confirmed, reading my expression. Their infrastructure integration is too embedded to replace entirely. James Parker will represent their interests on the committee. The implications hit me all at once. I would not only be working with James regularly, but as committee co-chair, I would effectively be overseeing his contributions to the project. I would be, in essence, his boss. Is that going to be a problem? Victoria asked carefully. I understand. There might be some competitive tension. Annika threw me a warning glance. This was a test, one that could unravel our victory if I showed any hint of personal conflict. Not at all, I replied smoothly. Mr. Parker is a banking professional, and I'm sure we can collaborate effectively for Peterson's benefit. Victoria seemed satisfied. I'm glad to hear it. James assured me the same when I informed him of our decision this morning. So James already knew. I wondered how he'd taken the news. After finalizing next steps, Victoria walked us to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she said, "One more thing, Ms. Morgan. Sandra mentioned you're engaged to Ryan Mitchell, who's joining Meridian as head of development." I tensed, wondering if James had raised the nepotism issue again. Yes, that's correct. Victoria nodded approvingly. His authentication protocol is part of what convinced our technical team Meridian was the right choice. Please extend our congratulations to him. The elevator doors closed on her smile, leaving Annika and me momentarily speechless. Well, Annika said finally, that was unexpected? Which part? I asked, still processing everything. All of it. Especially you co-chairing the committee with James Parker reporting to you. She gave me a sharp look. Can you handle that professionally, no matter what history exists between you? Absolutely, I assured her, though my mind was already racing with the implications. This is about Peterson banking, not personal dynamics. Annika seemed satisfied. Good, because this account could transform Meridian's position in the financial sector. I don't want any personal issues compromising that. Back at the office, congratulations poured in as news of our success spread. Derek organized an impromptu celebration, and Thomas immediately began assembling the implementation team. Through it all, I maintained a professional demeanor, though internally I was still processing the upcoming committee dynamics. Late that afternoon, alone in my office, I finally checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Ryan, undoubtedly wondering about the outcome, and 1 text message from James. Congratulations. Unexpected turn of events. We should discuss the committee structure before the first meeting. No hostility, no sarcasm, just a straightforward professional communication. It seemed almost too civil coming from James. I called Ryan first, sharing our victory and the surprising committee appointment. So you'll essentially be James's boss on this project? He asked, audibly delighted by the irony. Co-chair isn't exactly boss, I clarified, but I will have significant influence over how the implementation proceeds, including First Capital's role. Poetic justice, Ryan declared. How do you think he'll handle it? I'm not sure, I admitted. His text was surprisingly professional. Don't trust it, Ryan warned. James doesn't handle losing well, especially to people he's underestimated. After we hung up, I stared at James's message, debating my response. Professional courtesy demanded I acknowledge it, but Ryan's warning lingered. Finally, I typed, "Thank you. I look forward to collaborating on the Peterson implementation. Available. To discuss committee protocols anytime this week." The response came almost immediately. Drinks tonight? 7 p.m. at Archer's? Strictly professional planning. I hesitated. Meeting James alone seemed potentially problematic, but refusing could appear petty or unprofessional. After consideration, I replied, "Can do 7:30. See you there." At 7:25, I arrived. At Archer's, an upscale bar frequented by the financial industry crowd. James was already there, nursing what appeared to be scotch at a corner table. He stood as I approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Olivia." He greeted me with a nod. "Thank you for meeting." "Of course," I replied, slipping into the seat. This project will require effective communication between all parties. A server appeared, and I ordered a sparkling water, determined to keep my wits about me. When she departed, an awkward silence fell. "Congratulations again on securing the Peterson account," James finally said. "Victoria was quite impressed with your presentation." "Thank you. First Capital will remain an important partner for their legacy systems." James swirled his drink. "Yes, well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss." He leaned forward slightly. "This committee structure puts us in an unusual position. Professional colleagues with a personal connection," I acknowledged. "Exactly." His expression remained unreadable. "I think we should establish some ground rules, for both the project's sake and family harmony." I raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "First, a firewall between professional and personal interactions. What happens with Peterson stays separate from family gatherings." "Agreed," I said without hesitation. "That was always my intention." "Second," he continued, "transparent communication. No end runs around each other to Victoria or Sandra." I nodded. "Direct communication is essential for project success." "And third," he hesitated, "no using your position as co-chair to marginalize First Capital's role." There it was, the real concern beneath his professional veneer. He feared I would use my new authority to exact revenge for his previous behavior. "James," I said carefully, "I'm committed to making this implementation successful for Peterson Banking. That means utilizing all partners effectively, including First Capital. I have no interest in corporate vendettas." He studied me for a long moment, as if trying to gauge my sincerity. "Good, because this project is important for both our companies." Our drinks arrived, creating another brief silence. When the server left, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "I think we should also acknowledge what happened at your family reunion and afterward." James's expression tightened. "I don't see how that's relevant to our professional relationship." "It established the tone of our interaction," I pointed out. "Your comments about Ryan being a failure, your attempts to undermine his hiring, your threats about the Peterson account, they've created a foundation of mistrust that could affect our working relationship if we don't address it." James had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I may have been overzealous in my concerns about Ryan's career path. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd expected. Moving forward," I said, "I suggest we both commit to judging each other based on our professional contributions to this project, not on preconceptions or past interactions." James considered this, then nodded. "That seems reasonable." He finished his scotch and signaled for the check. "One more thing. Ryan starts at Meridian next week, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, instantly wary of his interest. "I may have—" He paused, seemingly choosing his words carefully. I may have given him insufficient credit for his technical capabilities. His authentication protocol is apparently quite significant for Peterson's security requirements. Coming from James, this reluctant acknowledgement of Ryan's accomplishments was startling. Before I could respond, he continued. Victoria mentioned you'll be making an organizational announcement about the Peterson implementation team tomorrow. I'd appreciate if you'd coordinate messaging with First Capital's PR department. Of course, I agreed. We should present a unified front to the market. As we prepared to leave, James extended his hand. To a productive partnership, he said formally. I shook it, noticing a subtle shift in his demeanor. Not quite respect, perhaps, but a new awareness. To Peterson Banking's successful evolution. Walking to my car, I replayed our conversation. James had been unexpectedly professional, even somewhat conciliatory. Was it genuine acceptance of our new dynamic, or simply strategic adaptation to circumstances he couldn't change? Either way, I reminded myself, this wasn't about personal victories or settling scores. It was about delivering excellence for Peterson, banking, and proving that Meridian's approach to blending tradition with innovation was the right one. Tomorrow would bring the official announcement, project kickoff plans, and Ryan's final week before joining Meridian. The professional landscape had shifted dramatically, placing me in a position of unexpected authority over someone who had dismissed me so contemptuously just weeks earlier. How that authority would reshape our personal dynamic remained to be seen. But for the first time, I felt genuinely optimistic that professional merit had prevailed over old biases and family politics. 3 weeks into the Peterson implementation project, I found myself actually enjoying the challenge. Our joint committee meetings were productive, with Sandra Peterson proving to be an insightful co-chair and fierce advocate for innovation. Even James had been surprisingly collaborative, offering valuable insights on banking regulations and legacy system limitations. The professional dynamic seemed to be working, until Ryan's welcome dinner at Meridian. The company tradition involved taking new executive hires and their partners to an elegant dinner with the leadership team. As marketing director, I would normally attend regardless, but as Ryan's fiancé, the event took on added personal significance. Are you sure this doesn't feel strange? Ryan asked as we dressed that evening. The whole company knows we're together, but now we're also colleagues. We've been transparent from the beginning, I reminded him, fastening a necklace. Besides, you report to the CTO, not to me. There's no conflict. True. He adjusted his tie, looking handsome in the charcoal suit I'd helped him select. I'm just glad James isn't around to make snide comments about nepotism tonight. I hesitated, remembering the email I'd received that afternoon but hadn't yet mentioned to Ryan. Actually, about that. Ryan turned, immediately alert to my tone. What? Victoria Peterson decided to send representatives to your welcome dinner. Apparently, she wants everyone working on the implementation to build stronger relationships. I took a breath. James will be there. Ryan's expression darkened. Seriously? The one work event that's supposed to be about celebrating my new position, and James gets to intrude on that too? It's not ideal, I acknowledged, but it's important for the Peterson relationship. And James has been professional in the committee meetings? Surprisingly so, I admitted. No passive-aggressive comments, no undermining suggestions. He's been competent. Ryan looked skeptical. James doesn't do competent and collaborative without an angle. I couldn't disagree, but I also couldn't fault James's contributions to the project so far. Well, whatever his angle, he's been effective, and tonight is just one dinner. When we arrived at Eloise, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, most of Meridian's executive team was already gathered in the private dining room. Annika made the introductions, presenting Ryan as the brilliant mind behind the authentication protocol that helped us secure the Peterson account. I watched with pride As Ryan connected easily with his new colleagues, his natural charm and technical knowledge quickly winning them over. After years of being underestimated by his own family, seeing him recognized for his talents was deeply satisfying. James arrived 15 minutes late, accompanied by another First Capital executive I recognized. From their pitch team, he greeted everyone professionally, offering Ryan a perfunctory "Congratulations on the new position," before turning his attention to Annika. Dinner proceeded pleasantly enough, with conversation flowing between business topics and more personal exchanges. When the main course arrived, Annika tapped her glass for attention. As you all know, securing the Peterson banking account represents a significant milestone for Meridian, she began. Their decision to partner with us for their digital transformation validates our approach to financial technology. Murmurs of agreement circled the table. This implementation will be challenging, requiring close collaboration between multiple partners, she continued, nodding toward James. But I'm confident in the team we've assembled, including our newest executive. She raised her glass toward Ryan. To Ryan Mitchell, whose technical brilliance and innovative thinking exemplify Meridian's values. We're fortunate to have you. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Even James participated, though I noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into a discussion with Meridian's CFO about the financial projections for the Peterson project. When I glanced across the table, I was surprised to see Ryan and James engaged in what appeared to be an intense but civil conversation. Later, as dessert was being served, I managed to maneuver next to Ryan. "Everything okay with James?" I asked. Quietly. "Surprisingly, yes," Ryan replied, looking somewhat bemused. He was asking detailed questions about my authentication protocol. Actual technical questions, not just making conversation. That's unexpected. He mentioned First Capital might be interested in implementing similar security measures for their own systems, Ryan added. Said he'd put me in touch with their security team. Before I could process this development, James approached us, wineglass in hand. Ryan was explaining the technical architecture behind his protocol, he said. Impressive work. Could have significant applications beyond the Peterson implementation. I studied James carefully, looking for the familiar signs of condescension or hidden agenda, but his interest seemed genuine. It's nice to see you taking Ryan's work seriously, I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. James had the grace to look mildly chagrined. Yes. Well, I may have been hasty in some of my earlier assessments. He glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard. Family dynamics can sometimes cloud professional judgment. This almost apology was so unexpected that neither Ryan nor I immediately responded. James continued. The protocol's approach to multi-factor authentication solves several issues First Capital has been struggling with. I'd like to explore potential applications if you're open to it. Ryan nodded slowly. I'd be happy to discuss it further. Within appropriate professional boundaries, of course. Of course, James agreed. With a nod to both of us, he rejoined. His colleague across the room. Ryan turned to me, eyebrows raised. Did James Parker just acknowledge I'm not a failure? I think he did, I confirmed, equally surprised. And he might have admitted he was wrong. Growth is possible for everyone, I suppose, Ryan said dryly. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly. As the gathering began to disperse, Annika pulled me aside. The Peterson project is proceeding ahead of schedule, she noted. Victoria Peterson specifically mentioned your leadership of the implementation committee as a key factor. The team is strong, I acknowledged. Even the First Capital integration is going more smoothly than expected. Annika nodded thoughtfully. James Parker seems to have accepted the partnership arrangement better than anticipated. Victoria mentioned, he's been unusually cooperative. He's been professional, I agreed cautiously. Good. She fixed me with her direct gaze. Because I have another proposition to discuss. The board has been considering creating a new position, Chief Experience Officer, to oversee all client-facing aspects of our technology implementations. Your work on the Peterson account has put you at the top of the candidate list. I blinked in surprise. Chief Experience Officer? That would be an executive leadership position. Yes, reporting directly to me, Annika confirmed. The formal offer will come next week, but I wanted to gauge your interest. I'm definitely interested, I said, mind racing with the implications. A C-suite position would represent a significant advancement, with broader influence across the entire company. Excellent. One more thing, Annika added. The role would include oversight of all major financial sector implementations, including ongoing management of the Peterson Committee, which meant continued authority over James's role in the project, now from an even higher position in the corporate hierarchy. As Ryan and I said our goodbyes, James approached one final time, extending his hand to Ryan. Welcome to the Peterson Implementation Team. I look forward to exploring that authentication protocol further. Ryan shook his hand. Thanks. It's been an interesting evening. James turned to me. The committee meeting next Thursday. I've prepared some recommendations for the legacy system migration timeline. Would you like me to send them to you and Sandra in advance? Please do, I replied professionally. We're particularly concerned about minimizing disruption during the transition. He nodded. I've addressed that specifically. First Capital has experience with phase migrations that might be useful. After James departed, Ryan looked at me incredulously. Who was that, and what has he done with your arrogant future cousin-in-law? I'm not entirely sure, I admitted, but I think he might be adapting to the new reality. The following Saturday brought another family gathering, this time at Ryan's parents' home to celebrate his father's retirement. As we pulled into the driveway, Ryan squeezed my hand. James confirmed he's coming, he warned. First family event since the reunion. Could be awkward. We've been managing professionally, I pointed out. We can handle a family dinner. The house was already filled with relatives when we arrived. Ryan's parents greeted us warmly, his mother pulling me into a tight hug. There's our power couple, she exclaimed. The tech executive and the banking committee chair. News of our professional developments had clearly traveled through the family. I circulated with Ryan, catching up with relatives I'd met at the previous gathering and meeting a few new ones. The atmosphere was relaxed and welcoming, a stark contrast to the tension of the reunion where I'd first encountered James. He arrived an hour into the party, without his wife, but looking more casual than I'd ever seen him in khakis and a button-down shirt. He greeted various family members, gradually making his way toward where Ryan and I stood chatting with Ryan's sister. Ryan, Olivia, he acknowledged with a nod. Congratulations on the retirement celebration. Uncle Robert certainly deserves it after 40 years. Thanks for coming, Ryan replied, his tone neutral but not hostile. Dad appreciates having the whole family here. An awkward silence fell, broken when Ryan's sister excused herself to help in the kitchen. James cleared his throat. I received the committee briefing materials for next week. The Phase 1 migration plan looks solid. Sandra and I think so, I agreed. Your team's input on the compliance requirements was particularly helpful. Ryan glanced between us. Maybe we could keep shop talk to a minimum? This is a family event. Of course, James said quickly. Actually, I wanted to say something else. He shifted uncomfortably. About the family reunion and some of the things I said then. Ryan tensed beside me, clearly not expecting this topic. I made some comments that were inappropriate and unfounded, James continued, looking directly at Ryan. Particularly about your career. Recent events have made it abundantly clear that I was mistaken in my assessment. It wasn't quite an apology, but from James, this admission was significant. Ryan studied his cousin for a moment. That's good to hear. I've had the opportunity to review some of your technical work through the Peterson implementation, James added. It's genuinely innovative. First Capital could benefit from similar approaches. I watched this exchange with amazement. Whether driven by professional necessity or genuine reevaluation, James was acknowledging Ryan's capabilities in a way I'd never expected. The authentication protocol is just the beginning, Ryan said, his stance relaxing slightly. I'm developing several new security frameworks at Meridian. I'd be interested in hearing about them, James said, sounding sincere. From a banking infrastructure perspective, of course. Sure, Ryan agreed cautiously. Within appropriate competitive boundaries. James nodded, then turned to me. And Olivia, congratulations on your pending promotion. Victoria mentioned the new Chief Experience Officer position yesterday during our status call. I blinked in surprise. That's not public information yet. Peterson Banking has a vested interest in Meridian's executive structure, James pointed out, particularly for the team overseeing their implementation. Before I could respond, Ryan's mother called everyone to the dining room. As we moved toward dinner, Ryan whispered, "New C-level position? When were you going to mention this?" "It's not official yet," I explained quickly. "Annika just discussed it with me at your welcome dinner. I was waiting for the formal offer." "Chief Experience Officer," Ryan repeated, a smile spreading across his face. "That's incredible, Olivia." The dinner that followed was surprisingly pleasant. James maintained a respectful distance, engaging primarily with his uncle and other relatives. When family members asked about the Peterson project, both James and I kept our comments professional and collaborative. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone in the kitchen, rinsing dessert plates before loading them into the dishwasher. The door swung open, and James entered, carrying a stack of coffee cups. "Need some help?" he offered, placing the cups on the counter. "Thanks," I said, somewhat warily. He began rinsing cups, working alongside me in silence for a moment before speaking. "Victoria Peterson thinks very highly of you," he said finally. "Says you have exceptional insight into how technology can enhance traditional banking services without disrupting core values." That's kind of her to say. "It's accurate," James acknowledged. "Your approach to the implementation has been more nuanced than I expected." I looked at him sideways. "What did you expect?" He shrugged slightly. "Typical tech company arrogance. Disruption that ignores banking realities, the usual Silicon Valley approach." "That was never Meridian's philosophy," I pointed out. "We believe in evolution, not revolution." "I'm beginning to see that." He handed me another rinsed cup. "It's actually quite similar to what I've been advocating at First Capital, though with less success." This admission caught me by surprise. "You've been pushing for more technology integration?" James nodded reluctantly. "For several years. Our executive team is traditionally minded. They see companies like Meridian as threats rather than potential partners." Suddenly, his initial hostility made more sense. He'd been caught between his own forward-thinking ideas and his company's resistance to change. The Peterson implementation could serve as a case study, I suggested. Demonstrate how traditional banking and innovative technology can strengthen each other. Perhaps. James finished the last cup and dried his hands. "Assuming the promotion comes through, your new role would give you significant influence over such partnerships." "It would," I agreed cautiously. He seemed to be choosing his next words carefully. "First Capital is considering expanding our technology partnerships program. Your experience bridging traditional banking and innovative solutions would be valuable to that conversation." I realized he was suggesting future professional collaboration beyond the Peterson project, a significant shift from his dismissive attitude at our first meeting. "I'd be open to discussing potential synergies," I said, "once the Peterson implementation is further along." James nodded, apparently satisfied. "I should find Lucy. We have an early flight tomorrow. At the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad Ryan found someone who recognizes his potential. That's something our family hasn't always done well. Before I could respond to this unexpected admission, he was gone. Ryan found me a few minutes later, still processing the conversation. Everything okay? You look thoughtful. I think I just had the strangest conversation of my career with your cousin, I admitted. Good strange or bad strange? Honestly, good strange. Almost like professional respect. Ryan considered this. James respecting someone else's professional capabilities? That might be a first. I think the Peterson project has shown him a different approach, I suggested. One where collaboration creates more value than competition. Or maybe having his younger cousin's fiancé as his effective boss has forced some serious self-reflection, Ryan added with a hint of satisfaction. I laughed softly. Maybe a bit of both. As we gathered our things to leave, Ryan's mother pulled me into another warm hug. It's so wonderful having you in the family, Olivia. You've brought such positive energy. Over her shoulder, I caught sight of James saying goodbye to Ryan's father. When our eyes met, he gave me a small but genuine nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't friendship, probably never would be, but it was something I hadn't expected. Mutual professional respect born from a situation that could have remained permanently hostile. On the drive home, Ryan rested his hand on mine. Who would have thought that when James called me a failure at that reunion, he was actually setting in motion events that would lead to the best career opportunities of our lives? Smiled, squeezing his hand. And who would have thought that being underestimated could be such a powerful advantage? To being underestimated, Ryan said, mimicking a toast. And to proving people wrong. I'll drink to that, I agreed. But I think I prefer what comes after, when people finally recognize your true capabilities. Because in the end, that recognition, even from someone who had dismissed me so completely, felt like the most satisfying victory of all.